Hi, welcome to the studio. Today we're going to take a little introductory dive into color, specifically the value and the temperature of that color. Temperature is the key one. And some other stuff along the way that I hope will be of use to you. Let's roll the intro. Okay, so the image that we're going to be working from today is based in a little pond area in Canmore, Alberta, just off the Bow River. It's an absolutely idyllic spot, and I go there as often as I can. One of the things to pay attention to is the dark to light ratio in this image. It was a low light scene, very close to the end of the day, and so we've got long shadows and really dramatic lighting. So that means that probably 50 or more % of this image is found in shadow. And a lot of people try to push the drama of that setting by pushing all those shadows as close to black as they can, thinking that the dynamic range between black and white or dark shadows and light areas is going to really be extra dramatic. And that's actually counterintuitive. It's actually the exact reverse. If we flatten those things by turning them mostly black, that's what we're doing. We're flattening them. We're taking information out of them. We're taking interest out of them. We're taking the flow out of them. So if we spend time in those types of lighting situations focusing on the minute switches between shadows, temperatures, values, all those color temperatures that are opposite to the lighter, warmer ones that we're going to see in the lit areas, that really feeds the drama of the scene. It actually makes a viewer feel like if they looked only that little bit harder, they'd see more information there, because we're giving them just enough information to let them know there's full form and mass and dimension in that shadow. It affects their visual reaction to the painting, but it also affects them psychologically. It gives them a deeper sense of that time and place. So don't make the mistake of flattening shadows. Really invest some time looking at those shadows and seeing what's in there. So pay attention to that as the time lapse goes forward. That'd be one of the principal things that I want to try to get across with this video. Thanks for spending time with me. If you like the video and you like what I'm trying to do with these videos, consider subscribing to my channel and hit me with a like and the bell buttons as well. I would appreciate that. Thank you very much, and let's get painting. Okay, so here is a picture of the scene that we're about to paint. This was only about an hour before sunset, and we had very long shadows, really rich color. And when I was standing there, it was absolutely brilliant. And most of that is actually not evident in this reference. So I want you to notice how flat the photo is in comparison to the painting. And so this is a picture of the final painting, and you can see that it's a lot richer in its color base and also in the values of those colors, especially into the sky with all those ranges of yellow and purple in the clouds. Now, I didn't have my equipment with me, so I wasn't able to plein air paint for a study, so I did a quick field sketch instead. I've got an app on my phone I can draw with, but I prefer to carry a little pad of paper with me. So here's a look at that sketch. Just as it comes up, I'll admit it's but ugly and it won't make sense to anybody, but it only took about 20 seconds to draw, and it doesn't really matter. It's nothing but context for the notes. And the notes are all about color and value. That's really the whole context. So as we take a closer look at the notes, I make a few technical things here and there, like a skinny tree. It's about the character of that tree. But it's about the red and yellow that's rimming the backs of those trees, that's outlining those trees that I wanted to pay attention to. And then this note is really about the quote-unquote whites being more buttery yellows, and the darker clouds having pink and purples in them, rather than the flat gray and the blown out white that the photo shows. This is a note about how dense the shadows are. A lot of photographs over contrast. In this case, I was making a note that the photo's not bad in that regard. It probably won't, because it was very dark. This little sliver here is a little bit of land showing through the transparent water, and it's just in between the shadows being cast by those trees, and it actually reads as red, or almost a pure sienna is the note that I made. But as we actually turn our attention back to the photograph, the actual photo up on the top there, you'll see reads more as green rather than red. Now, I'm admittedly not the best photographer in the world, but I noticed those kinds of anomalies happening a lot. So the difference between the human eye and our reaction to the value of color And the value, I mean, meaning like the importance of it, and the way the camera register it are not the same thing. Now here I'm going to be blocking in the image with warm and cools. In this moment here, I'm just going to subtract some of that cloud base that I just put in, because I want my warm and cools to be pure in those trees. So I don't want a lot of muddy mixtures. So I'm negatively drawing to achieve that. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I just want to focus, while this is happening, on exactly how I'm drawing. So you see I'm pushing the cool in now, whereas a second ago I was really putting in warm greens. So the contrast between those two is really going to start giving me a sense of the mood and feeling of this place right out of the gate. And I'm also using those temperature bounce points from warm and cool as the base of my drawing as well. So it's easier to draw something straight on, just drawing the shapes of the trees and then filling in that information. But I find it more challenging to do it this way, and therefore I like it a lot more. I want to focus on temperature in this piece. Because it's such a dramatic light, it's important to me to accomplish that and all those temperature switches from the sunny areas into the shadow areas as effectively as possible. So I'm using my block in, as I say, as an opportunity to make that happen while I'm also getting the drawing in place. Now, getting back to the rubbing out bit, I'll just flesh that out just a little bit more. So if you are about to add paint to an area and you're worried that it's going to mix too much with what you've already got on, just rub what you've got on right off and then apply the fresh paint like I did. When you do this, when I do it, I don't just randomly wipe away either. Like I say, I use it as a drawing opportunity. So I try to get the shape correct and then I refine with the new paint layer. So that's just a little thing that I like to do. It pushes my observational eye and my drawing ability quite a bit. As a technical note as well, for anybody who's wondering, I like to use a microfiber cloth for this kind of work. It doesn't leave any debris behind, like it doesn't pill. So I get a good clean wipe with no fibers from the cloth left in the paint. So back to the earlier talk about temperatures. They are pivotal in nailing the feeling of a piece. So once I hit the shadows, I want to emphasize the point that I'm feeding into the drama. I'm really trying to establish the feeling of that piece right away. And I do like to establish the drawing and challenge my drawing eye at the same time. So I also should emphasize that when I start a painting, typically, not always, but usually I start pretty thin. Like most of the paint that's on here to this point is quite thin. I'm not really timid. I don't mean it that way. I'm actually just trying to be strategic. So because of the drawing heavy approach that I use, if I place a key value or a color in the wrong place, then I don't have a lot of paint and detail to deal with in undoing that kind of a boo-boo. I can just paint over it or very quickly grab my cloth, rub it out, and reset the image. So I think that's just a fun little approach to the whole thing. If I go thick, which I do sometimes, then I have to go thicker yet with each successive passage of paint. And for a lot of people, myself included sometimes, that gets a little bit unwieldy and a little out of control quite quickly. Now, the other thing that I want you to notice as I paint through this area is that I establish trees and then I push into the clouds and then I'll go back to the trees and I'll go back to the clouds again. And I do it several times over and it probably, I think in the context of a time lapse like this, when everything is so fantastically sped up, it probably looks like a very repetitive thing. Like, why is this dude doing the same thing over and over? Why doesn't he just do it once and leave it alone? I'm actually doing it because I'm pushing in edge work. I love forming something and then knocking it away with something around it to create a greater sense of dimension through the edge work. That's really a big focus for me. So I'm doing all that on purpose. Sometimes it's because I'm correcting a drawing mistake, but 98% of the time it's because I'm really looking for a higher degree of integration in the edges because I'm really trying to push the sense of dimension in the image. Another thing that I should probably mention earlier on would be better because you can see it better, is that this image is pretty much split. The horizon line that we would be looking at is actually right in the very middle of the canvas, and that's considered by many to be a no-no. It's just not a good thing to do. It can cause a great feeling of static and lack of motion in a composition. In this case, I like that split image because the water is so eye-grabbing, I don't mind it. Plus, it conveys the split between the land and the sky. And I accept that challenge, actually. Whenever I hear a rule, I automatically want to test it and see if that's true. And as I say, a lot of schools of thought say the split horizon is a no-no because of that static lack of movement in a composition. But I say that actually occurs naturally. When we look at something like this, we tend to naturally balance it in our minds. And so I always think, well, if nature and our brains get away with it, there must be a way I can achieve it in a painting. Now, it doesn't always work, but I love trying out the challenge. In this case, I think it does work because there's so much interest in the water that at bottom weighs the composition beautifully. And the tall tree on the left with the circular motion of the clouds bringing you into the clump of trees on the right-hand island and then back down into the water reflection, I think creates a beautiful sense of movement in the composition. So in this case, I don't think it was an issue at all. But I do notice that there's a lot of opportunities in landscape to challenge some of those rules. Another one is not doing horizontal bands in a painting, and yet you'll see that in nature all the time. And that little rebel in my head always yells at me going, well, again, if it happens in nature, there's got to be a way of making it work in a painting. And I probably only succeed about 50% of the time, I would say, but I just love trying stuff like that. So anyway, speaking of the water, the complicated nature of the water was another motivation for me painting this piece. I guess I would say that you cannot grow in your pursuit of art if you're not challenging the current skill level you're at. So this water scared me to death. If I was glazing it through a bunch of layers, it'd probably be a little more straightforward. I don't think easy, because I don't think anything is easy about this water, but it would be more straightforward. Doing it a la prima, wet into wet, as I am here, that's a whole other challenge because you have to try to create those subtle shifts in temperature and everything else with really obviously wet paint. So doing a thin little glaze to bring in the warm sienna in that little bit of earth we can see through the transparent water, that's not really an option. You have to figure it out as the paint is going on. And that scared the crap out of me. So, but it was fun. I kind of enjoyed the idea of doing it and seeing if I could do it. So that was a huge motivator. I just can't emphasize enough, one of the big things that people should be looking to do is challenge the current skill level you're at. A lot of us, myself for a lot of my career, played it safe and just sort of kept things at a status quo. Gee, I can do faces really well, so I'll just do faces. Maybe I should start doing hands and people in motion walking with full figures. Maybe I should try putting somebody on a horse or having somebody ride a bike or something. That would challenge me. That would make me incorporate something more than just the face. And those things are scary. If you're like me, they're very scary. They're intimidating, but they're also incredibly exciting and a lot of fun. Especially if you nail it, then you feel pretty damn good about it. So I would throw that out there. Here, just in this moment, you can see a little bit of that buttery yellow coming into the sky, and it's so much better to my mind than the photo is on the left. I mean, that sky in the photo is just so blown out. The property of the camera, really, at the end of the day, can because it's a one-eyed Cyclops instrument, it can only show you light or dark to varying degrees. It tries to blend them, but it can really only dominate one or the other. So if it shows me information in the shadows, it's going to blow out the highlights and vice versa. So that's why when we're standing there, we tend to see things so much different. And just little hits of red happening around those trees according to that note that I made in the sketch. So hopefully that sort of brings that whole bit full circle for you. The other thing I thought I might talk about as this time lapse was going along is just the notion that I didn't know what I wanted to paint for this video. And I think I felt frozen. In my case, I had too many options to choose from. So I just opened up a folder on my computer and I turned it into the icon form instead of being able to see thumbnails. And that because then I couldn't see the images, and I just kind of rolled my mouse up and down, and then just stopped on one and picked it, and that's the one, kind of like rolling the numbers on a lottery, and that's the one that I picked. So boom, we ended up on this one, and so now that's what I'm painting for this week's demo. So the lesson that I wanted to talk about in that is just don't wait. Don't stop if you're feeling intimidated. Don't stop if you're feeling overwhelmed. Don't stop if you're feeling fearful. That you don't have enough talent to do the piece, anything crazy like that. Don't let these negative thoughts hold you back. The only thing that can really hold you back is that intimidation itself. What you need to do is paint to grow. So if you're frozen and scared to choose something, you're not going to paint, and therefore you're not going to be actually progressing. So at the end of the day, I think one of the great things that you can do for yourself, one of the favors you can give to yourself, is just not worrying about it. Just go ahead and paint. In my case, I was paralyzed from a more positive place. I love painting, but I love the paint itself so much that I don't really, in many ways, care what I paint. I care that I paint. So, of course, I have ideas that will just surge into my brain that I end up absolutely needing to paint. Often, social statement images or direct storytelling pieces of the like. But if I'm between those types of ideas, it's because I love painting in and of itself so much. I just pick something and go. So I don't let myself be held back through any kind of paralysis, either the negative thoughts or just having too much to choose from. Another common one is waiting for inspiration too. I hear a lot of that sometimes. I just didn't feel inspired, so I didn't do it. In my opinion, and forgive me for the bluntness of this, that's a fool's game. I can be in the most grumpy, procrastinating mood ever. But if I force myself to pick up the brushes and get going, and sometimes that's what it takes, within minutes I'm charged up and I'm feeling inspired, because inspiration comes to me. Art and inspiration that feed it are always there. It's like a fruit hanging on a tree. You can grab it anytime you want. It's waiting for us to come to them. So once we do, they instantly connect with us, join in, and we all create a good painting. So if you believe that inspiration is a thing that comes to you, instead of you having to go to it, you're going to miss too many opportunities to count. And in my mind, that's a tragedy and a waste of what could have been real creative time and growth. So that's something to really think about as you move forward in your career and try to grow. Really focus on anything that's actually stopping you from creating. It's usually some kind of head game we're playing with ourselves, some kind of a delay tactic. And mostly I think it's because we're all a little bit afraid and intimidated by this. There's something intensely personal and deeply vulnerable about creating artwork. And it puts us in a place of timidity sometimes. We just end up feeling like, God, what if I'm no good? What if I try my best and I still don't get better? All these little things that will undermine us keep popping up. So anytime you catch yourself placing yourself in a little bit of a head game like that, do whatever you can to rise above it and to not let it hold you back. That's just hopefully something that will resonate with you if you've struggled in the ways that I have. One of the other things that I would point out, and this is a good passage to talk about it too, actually, I think, is how much I love brushwork. So I love it when people see what I'm working on and they can see a painting right away. They don't see a photograph. They're not going to see something that actually feels photographic in its nature at all. They're going to be able to bite into this as a painting because they're going to see some juicy brush strokes and they're going to notice the texture of the paint throughout. So that's very appealing to me and a primary motivation to paint. I want to point out that little sliver that I was talking about as well that I just knocked in there with the sienna. I actually did decide to use pure sienna in there, and I'll settle it down and calm it down, and I'll bring a little bit of green, sort of mossy look into it as well as the time lapse carries on. But I did want to create a base of that really, really warm color that I saw when I was standing at the edge of the pond, certainly as opposed to what I see in that photograph. The last thing that I would really maybe touch on is, and it's a main reason I use the photograph as a reference in this particular demo, is just the whole concept and the whole argument that people have in the art community about real life versus photo reference. There's a lot of opinions out there about it. I have my biases. When I first started, I didn't know any different, so I started with photos. And when I discovered from life painting, I was a changed man. It made a huge impact on me. And I kind of swung the pendulum fairly far, and I went for a little while trying to avoid photographic references entirely. And then I kind of, I think, matured. Other people disagree with me depending on where they fall on this debate. But I feel like I matured to a point where I realized that art is about the painting at the end of the day. It's about the sculpture. It's about the drawing, whatever medium you're using. It's about the end result. And whatever helps me achieve that end result, and in my philosophy helps me to still grow my skill base, I think is fair game. I think that it's just borderline silly to restrict myself from a tool that will help me achieve my ends simply because of a bias, something that stops me from growing in that area. So I would just offer that to you if you're one of those folks who, like I got bullied a little bit sometimes when I went to art shows, when people would see me working from photos, and then other people, when they would see me working just from life, would go, photos a lot easier. Like I'd hit the extremes of both opinions, and they would be very impactful for me because I was kind of insecure. I kind of learned on the job, as it were. So a lot of other artists that had been to art school or ateliers, I just assumed knew so much more than me, and were much stronger than I am. So I just deferred to their opinions a lot of the time. And it took me a while to realize my own philosophy and the things that were important to me in this game. And one of them is that I'll use any reference. You can use a photo, you can paint from life, you can draw from imagination entirely, or you can do a merging of those four. There's really only those four ways of doing it. And I choose all the above because that makes me the fullest and most realized artist that I can be. So yeah, one final note as we're wrapping up the time lapse here. You can't tell because it's been so sped up, but various times during this painting I've stood back quite a ways from the easel and gotten a bird's eye view of the painting so I can assess the next crucial things that need to be done. And just as a few final notes here, I'm just highlighting some of those background trees and working some of the color and value transitions in the water. And that brings it up to a finished place. So it's important to really stand back and really see it as wholly as possible. Don't just let yourself get too microscoped in. And just a little zoom in for you to see the texture and the brush strokes that I was talking about earlier. Okay, thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, just shoot them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Two final thoughts before we sign off today. One is that my earnest desire is to provide any information that would be useful to you in these videos. But it's based out of things that I know that I do and that work for me, and that's the operative phrase, they work for me. I don't know that they'll work for you. So you have to be the best judge. So judge it by how you feel about it. If something's coming across that makes you feel excited, makes you think immediately, oh, I could use that, that will help me, then great. But if you feel bogged down or bugged or weighed down by anything, just toss it. Don't toss it out of hand, though. I mean, sometimes when we have those struggles, that's an indicator that knowledge is coming, that we're on the edge of some knowledge, that an epiphany might occur, because we do learn through struggle. But sometimes struggle indicates just it's not for you. It's just not lining up with your personality, your goals, or what you're trying to accomplish in art. And you can better make the judgment on which side of that fence you're falling on. So if you're on the side where it feels like a waste of time, just discard it. Don't let it bug you or bring you down, confuse you or slow you down. The big thing, and this leads me to the most important and then my second point, is the best advice I can give anybody to grow in this craft is to do it. So if something's holding you back, that's not good. I mean, the key to success in this is miles on the brush. There's no other way around it. It's a hard truth for people that want a short course and want fast success, but there's no substitute to actually doing it. In fact, I would say the only way you can fail in this craft, period, the only way you can fail, in my opinion, is by not doing it. If you're actually trying it, you're putting brush to canvas, you're experimenting, you're offering your time into it, you're going to grow. You're going to grow like a stinkweed. It's like Bob's your uncle. Here you go. It's all working for you. But if you are not, then you're not. You're not going to grow. You got to do it to grow in it, to learn in it, to get better at it. And if you're not, so that's the bad news. Don't let yourself be held back by intimidation then. Don't let yourself be held back by things that are confusing you, weighing you down. Just find your way through it. Your voice in art is as important as mine or anybody else's. That's the other thing about it. Individual pursuit in art is absolutely key in my opinion. So you putting miles on your brush teaches you who you are and the kind of artist you want to be. So there you go. I just want you to think about that, and hopefully that's of use to you. Stay safe during this weird COVID time that we find ourselves in. I hope by being at the easel and working and growing in your skills that you'll be discovering a deep sense of meditation and healing during this time as well. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next video.